A quiet 17-year-old girl collapsed in the school hallway, blood streaming from her face, while 3 popular students stood over her laughing. But what nobody expected was that her father, a decorated Marine Corps veteran with 2 tours in Afghanistan, was walking through those same doors at that exact moment for a parent-teacher conference. What happened next would not only change the lives of everyone in that hallway, but would expose a conspiracy of silence that had been protecting the school's most privileged bullies for years. This isn't just another bullying story. This is about what happens when a warrior father discovers his daughter has been living in hell, and the adults who were supposed to protect her had been covering it up. Meet Isabella Rodriguez, a soft-spoken, honor student whose only crime was being different in a school that worshipped conformity. While her classmates flaunted designer clothes and expensive cars, Isabella worked part-time jobs to help her single father pay rent. While they posted perfect lives on social media, she buried herself in books, dreaming of a scholarship that would take her far from the nightmare her school had become. But Isabella had a secret weapon she didn't even know about. Her father, Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez, wasn't just any parent. He was a man who had spent years in combat zones, trained to recognize threats, neutralize enemies, and never abandoned his fellow soldiers. And in his mind, his daughter was the most important soldier under his command. The 3 students who had made Isabella's life a living hell thought they were untouchable. After all, their parents donated millions to the school, sat on the board, and had been covering up their children's incidents for years. They had perfected the art of psychological warfare, making Isabella's daily existence a carefully orchestrated campaign of humiliation and isolation. What they didn't know was that every bruise they inflicted, every cruel word they whispered, every moment of torment they subjected Isabella to, was about to be answered by a man who had sworn an oath to protect the innocent and destroy those who prey on the defenseless. If you believe that justice always finds a way, even in the darkest moments, smash that like button right now. Comment Semper Fi if you think every child deserves a protector like this Marine father. And subscribe, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in parental justice and prove that sometimes the quiet ones have the most powerful allies. This story contains documented evidence from security cameras, recorded phone calls between school administrators, and testimony that was buried for months until one father's determination brought it all to light. What you'll discover in the next few minutes will change your perspective on school bullying forever and show you exactly what happens when Marine training meets parental fury. But to understand how this moment of reckoning was possible, and why it took a combat veteran to expose what teachers and administrators had been hiding, I need to take you back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, Isabella Rodriguez walked through the pristine halls of Westfield Academy, her worn backpack a stark contrast to the designer bags that surrounded her. This wasn't just any private school, it was where senators' children rubbed shoulders with tech billionaires' offspring, where a single year's tuition cost more than most families earned. Isabella was there on a full academic scholarship, the first in her family to attend such an institution. Her father, Miguel, had sacrificed everything to give her this opportunity. After serving 2 brutal tours in Afghanistan, he'd returned home to find his wife had left them both. Unable to cope with the changes war had brought to their family, Miguel channeled his military discipline into raising Isabella alone, working double shifts at a construction company while attending night school to become a certified electrician. Every extra dollar went towards supplementing Isabella's scholarship. Requirements, uniforms, books, technology fees that the wealthy families never even noticed. Isabella excelled academically, but socially, she was an outsider in a world of privilege. While her classmates talked about spring break trips to Europe and summer houses in the Hamptons, Isabella spent her breaks working at a local diner, saving money for college applications. She spoke softly, chose her words carefully, and had learned to make herself invisible, a survival skill that served her well in the combat zone of adolescent social hierarchy. The scholarship came with strings attached. Isabella had to maintain a 4.0 GPA, participate in community service, and represent the school's diversity initiative in promotional materials. She was essentially a living, breathing advertisement for Westfield's supposed commitment to social equality, while being constantly reminded that she didn't truly belong. Miguel was proud beyond words. His daughter was brilliant, kind, and resilient, qualities he'd tried to instill through years of single parenting. He attended every parent-teacher conference, every school event, always in his cleanest work clothes, standing slightly apart from the other parents in their designer suits and cocktail dresses. The other parents were polite but distant, creating an invisible barrier that Isabella felt every single day. But Isabella never complained. She'd inherited her father's stoic strength, his ability to endure hardship without breaking. She threw herself into her studies, spending hours in the library, tutoring younger students, and volunteering at local charities. She was determined to prove that she deserved her place at Westfield, that merit could triumph over privilege. What Isabella didn't realize was that her very existence threatened the natural order of Westfield Academy. Her perfect grades made other students look mediocre. Her genuine kindness highlighted their superficiality. Her work ethic exposed their entitlement, and for 3 students in particular, Isabella Rodriguez represented everything they despised about their parents' forced diversity initiatives. The first sign of trouble came during junior year, when Isabella was selected to represent Westfield at a prestigious academic competition. The announcement was made in front of the entire student body, and Isabella felt the weight of hostile stares as she walked to the podium. She'd just painted a target on her back, and the hunters were already circling. That night, Isabella came home to find her father cleaning his military medals, a ritual he performed when he was deep in thought or troubled. She wanted to tell him about the competition, about the scholarship opportunities it might bring, but something in his eyes made her hesitate. Instead, she simply said, "Good night, Dad. I love you." Miguel looked up at his daughter, seeing something in her posture that triggered every protective instinct his military training had honed. "Everything okay at school, Mia?" Isabella paused at the doorway, her hand on the frame. For a moment, she almost told him everything. But then she remembered his double shifts, his sacrifices, his dreams for her future. "Everything's perfect, Dad. Just tired from studying." But nothing was perfect, and the storm that was about to engulf Isabella's world had already begun. The 3 students who would make Isabella's life a nightmare weren't random bullies, they were Westfield Academy royalty, and their reign of terror was about to begin with calculated precision. Madison Blackwell was the ringleader, a 17-year-old sociopath wrapped in designer clothing and fake charity work. Her father owned the largest real estate development company on the East Coast, and her mother sat on Westfield's board of directors. Madison had perfected the art of cruelty disguised as concern, delivering devastating psychological attacks with a smile that fooled every adult around her. She'd been groomed since childhood to believe that people like Isabella were temporary inconveniences in her world of privilege. Her lieutenant was Trevor Ashford, whose tech mogul father had donated the school's entire computer laboratory. Trevor was intelligent enough to engineer sophisticated harassment campaigns, but cruel enough to enjoy watching his victims suffer. He'd learned early that money could buy silence, and his family's influence could erase consequences. To Trevor, Isabella represented everything his parents had taught him to despise about diversity quotas, taking opportunities away from deserving students like himself. The third member of their trinity was Cassandra Pierce, daughter of a federal judge who'd built her career on tough-on-crime rhetoric, while her own daughter committed psychological warfare daily. Cassandra was the strategist, the one who understood exactly how to inflict maximum damage while maintaining plausible deniability. She'd studied Isabella's routines, her insecurities, her pressure points with the dedication of a military tactician. Their campaign against Isabella began subtly, the kind of microaggressions that adults dismissed as typical teenage drama. Books would disappear from Isabella's locker. Her carefully prepared lunch would mysteriously end up in the trash. Group projects would be reorganized at the last minute, leaving her scrambling to keep up. When Isabella tried to report these incidents, she was told she was being too sensitive or not trying hard enough to fit in. The trio had learned from their parents' corporate boardroom tactics. They documented Isabella's every misstep, photographed her worn clothing, recorded her accent when she spoke Spanish with the janitor, her father's friend who'd helped Miguel get his first job after returning from Afghanistan. They created a detailed psychological profile of their target, identifying her deepest fears and greatest vulnerabilities. Madison discovered that Isabella worked part-time at Rosa's Diner, a small family restaurant in the Latino section of town. She convinced her mother to organize a Westfield family event there, bringing 20 privileged families to gawk at Isabella as she served tables in her uniform. The humiliation was exquisite. Isabella had to serve the very classmates who tormented her daily, while they smiled and took photos to support local businesses. Trevor launched the digital warfare phase, creating fake social media accounts to spread rumors about Isabella's scholarship. He started whispers that she was only at Westfield to fill a quota, that her perfect grades came from cheating, that her father was involved in illegal activities. The lies spread through the school's social networks like wildfire, each retelling adding new, more damaging details. Cassandra played the long game, befriending Isabella's few potential allies and slowly poisoning them against her. She'd share concerns about Isabella's mental health, suggest that her quiet nature was actually dangerous, plant seeds of doubt about her integrity. One by one, Isabella's tentative friendships crumbled, leaving her completely isolated. The school's administration was either willfully blind or actively complicit. When Isabella's grades began to slip due to stress and sleep deprivation, she was told she needed to apply herself better, or risk losing her scholarship. When she appeared exhausted in class, teachers assumed she was being lazy rather than investigating why a previously perfect student was struggling. What none of them understood was that Madison, Trevor, and Cassandra weren't just bullying Isabella, they were conducting a systematic campaign to destroy her spirit, her confidence, and her future. They wanted her to break completely, to drop out in shame, to serve as a warning to any other scholarship students who might dare to excel in their sacred space. The trio made one crucial mistake in their psychological warfare. They assumed Isabella was truly alone. that her quiet father was just another working-class parent who could be intimidated or ignored. They had no idea that Miguel Rodriguez wasn't just any construction worker. He was a decorated combat veteran who'd spent years in situations where recognizing threats and protecting the innocent wasn't just a job, it was a sacred duty. The war for Isabella's soul was about to escalate beyond anything Westfield Academy had ever seen, and the three architects of her torment were about to learn that some fights you cannot win with money, influence, or cruelty. The attack came on a Tuesday morning in late November, orchestrated with military precision by three teenagers who had confused privilege with power. Isabella arrived at school to find explicit photos printed and taped inside her locker images that had been digitally manipulated to show her face on compromising bodies, along with a note that read, "Scholarship trash belongs in the dumpster." Madison had spent weeks planning this psychological nuclear strike. She'd hired a college-age graphic designer through anonymous online channels, paying cash to create the doctored images. Trevor had hacked into the school's security system to disable the cameras in Isabella's hallway during the precise window when the photos would be planted. Cassandra had orchestrated the timing to ensure maximum exposure. Right before first period, when the hallways would be packed with students, the photos spread through the school's social media networks within minutes. Students gathered around Isabella's locker, some laughing, others filming her reaction with their phones. Isabella stood frozen, her hands shaking as she pulled down image after humiliating image, each one more degrading than the last. The crowd grew larger, feeding off her visible distress like sharks sensing blood in the water. "Looks like Rodriguez finally showed her true colors," Madison announced loudly, her voice carrying the perfect tone of mock concern. "I always wondered how she really earned that scholarship." The crowd erupted in cruel laughter, and Isabella felt something inside her chest shattered completely. But the trio's masterpiece wasn't just the photos, it was what happened next. As Isabella ran toward the bathroom, clutching the torn images to her chest, she collided with Mrs. Hampton, the school's disciplinary coordinator. The photos scattered across the hallway floor, and Mrs. Hampton's expression shifted from confusion to disgust as she examined them. "Miss Rodriguez, my office." "Now," Isabella tried to explain, her words tumbling over each other in panic. She wasn't in those photos. They were fake. Someone was trying to destroy her. But Mrs. Hampton's face remained stone cold. The woman had been quietly resentful of the scholarship program from the beginning, viewing it as a disruption to Westfield's traditional student body. Bringing pornographic material onto school grounds is grounds for immediate expulsion, Mrs. Hampton declared, her voice echoing through the now silent hallway. "Your scholarship is terminated, effective immediately. Your father will be contacted to arrange your immediate removal from campus." Isabella felt the world tilt on its axis. Everything she'd worked for, everything her father had sacrificed for, was crumbling around her. The scholarship wasn't just her education, it was her future, her escape, her father's dreams made manifest. Without it, she had nothing. Madison, Trevor, and Cassandra watched from a distance, their faces masks of false sympathy, while their eyes gleamed with triumph. They'd done more than humiliate Isabella, they'd destroyed her completely, removed her from their world permanently. The scholarship girl who dared to excel beyond her station was finally being put back in her place. The news spread through Westfield Academy like wildfire. Isabella Rodriguez, the perfect scholarship student, had been expelled for bringing pornographic images to school. The details grew more salacious with each retelling. Her academic achievements were forgotten, her character assassinated in a single morning. Isabella walked to the school's parking lot in a daze, her belongings hastily packed into cardboard boxes by security guards who treated her like a criminal. Students whispered and pointed as she passed, some taking final photos to commemorate the fall of someone who dared to rise above her circumstances. She sat on a bench outside the school's main entrance, staring at her phone, knowing she had to call her father but unable to form the words that would break his heart. How could she tell him that all his sacrifices had been for nothing? How could she explain that the world he'd fought to protect had turned against his daughter? Miguel Rodriguez was on a construction site 40 minutes away, installing electrical wiring in what would become someone else's dream home. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Dad, something happened at school. Can you come get me? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The Marine veteran who'd survived IED explosions and sniper fire felt a chill of pure terror run down his spine. His daughter never apologized for things that weren't her fault. Isabella was in trouble, real trouble, and every instinct he'd developed in combat zones screamed at him to move, to protect, to fight. Madison Blackwell stood at her classroom window, watching Isabella's broken form on the bench below, and smiled. The scholarship girl was finally gone, and Westfield Academy could return to its natural order. What Madison didn't know was that she'd just declared war on a man who'd been trained by the United States Marine Corps to win battles that seemed impossible. The quiet girl was down, but her Marine father was about to walk into the fight of his life. Miguel Rodriguez arrived at Westfield Academy 37 minutes after receiving Isabella's text. his work truck screeching into the pristine parking lot like a battle-worn Humvee entering hostile territory. He found his daughter sitting on that bench, her entire world contained in 2 cardboard boxes, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the school that had just destroyed her future. The moment Miguel saw Isabella's broken posture, something primal awakened in him, the same protective instinct that had kept his unit alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan. This wasn't just his daughter crying. This was his fellow soldier under attack, and he'd sworn an oath to never leave anyone behind. "Mia, what happened?" Miguel's voice was soft, but Isabella could hear the steel underneath the tone he'd used. When calling in airstrikes on enemy positions, she tried to explain through her sobs, showing him the remnants of the doctored photos, telling him about Mrs. Hampton's cold dismissal, about the scholarship that was gone forever. Miguel listened, in complete silence, his jaw tightening with each detail. He'd seen innocent civilians targeted by insurgents, watched good soldiers destroyed by false intelligence, but seeing his own daughter victimized by privileged teenagers, using tactics that would make enemy combatants proud, ignited a fury he'd never experienced. "Dad, I didn't do anything wrong," Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. "I worked so hard. I followed every rule. I never caused trouble. Why did they destroy me?" Miguel cut him off by placing Trevor's laptop screenshots on the desk, the planning documents, the celebration videos, the detailed psychological warfare manual the trio had created. "Principal Davidson, your irregularities constitute systematic persecution of a minor based on socioeconomic discrimination. Federal prosecutors call that a hate crime." Victoria Blackwell's corporate lawyer composure finally cracked. "You can't prove my daughter was involved in any of this. These are just teenage pranks that got out of hand." Miguel's final document landed on the desk like a guided missile hitting its target. Bank records showing payments from Victoria Blackwell's personal account to the graphic designer Hood, created the doctored photos, traced through digital forensics and confirmed by FBI financial crimes investigators. "Mrs. Blackwell, your daughter didn't just participate in the conspiracy, you financed it. You paid for the weapon used to destroy my daughter's reputation in future." The room fell into stunned silence. Miguel continued placing evidence with methodical precision: Carmen's recorded conversations, Dr. Williams' documentation of the scholarship elimination program, testimony from 17 other families whose children had been systematically destroyed by Westfield's corrupt practices. "Here's what's going to happen," Miguel announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man delivering terms of surrender to defeated enemies. "Isabella Rodriguez will be immediately reinstated with full honors. Her academic record will be corrected to reflect her true achievements. She will receive a formal apology from this institution and financial compensation for the damage to her reputation and future prospects." Mrs. Hampton found her voice. "Mr. Rodriguez, you can't just walk in here and make demands." "I'm not making demands. I'm explaining reality." Miguel placed his final document on the desk, a federal indictment prepared by Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, ready for filing within hours. "Madison Blackwell, Trevor Ashford, and Cassandra Pierce will be immediately expelled and banned from this campus. They will face criminal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations. Their parents will face charges for aiding and abetting those crimes." Victoria Blackwell's voice shook with rage and fear. "You're threatening children over a school incident." Miguel's eyes went cold as winter in Afghanistan. "Mrs. Blackwell, what your daughter did to mine wasn't a school incident. It was psychological warfare conducted by sociopaths, who learned their cruelty from parents who taught them that money and privilege put them above consequences. Today they learned that lesson was wrong." At precisely 10:15 a.m., while Miguel was presenting his evidence to school administrators, Rebecca Chen's expose went live across multiple news platforms. "Private School Conspiracy: How Wealthy Families Systematically Destroy Scholarship Students." The article contained every piece of evidence Miguel had gathered, presented with devastating clarity and backed by irrefutable documentation. Simultaneously, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison filed federal charges with the U.S. Attorney's Office, triggering immediate FBI investigation into civil rights violations at Westfield Academy. The timing was perfect while school administrators were still processing Miguel's evidence. Federal agents were already preparing search warrants for student records and financial documents. Miguel stood up, closing his briefcase with the same precision he'd opened it. "Principal Davidson, you have until tomorrow morning to implement every requirement I've outlined. Otherwise, federal investigators will assume control of this institution pending criminal proceedings. The choice is yours." As Miguel walked toward the door, Victoria Blackwell made one final desperate attempt. "Mr. Rodriguez, surely we can reach some private arrangement that benefits everyone." Miguel turned back, his expression carrying the weight of 2 tours in combat zones and 20 years of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. "Mrs. Blackwell, the only arrangement that benefits everyone is justice. Your daughter destroyed mine for sport. Now she learns that actions have consequences, even for people who thought they were untouchable." Miguel Rodriguez walked out of Westfield Academy the same way he'd entered, with quiet dignity and unshakable purpose. But now he carried something else. The absolute certainty that his daughter's enemies had been completely and utterly defeated. The Marine had completed his mission. Total victory was achieved 40-8 hours after Miguel Rodriguez walked out of Westfield Academy. The institution that had prided itself on exclusivity and tradition was in complete freefall. Federal agents had seized computer systems, financial records, and administrative files dating back 5 years. The FBI's Civil Rights Division had launched a full investigation into what they were calling the most systematic case of educational discrimination in private school history. Madison Blackwell, Trevor Ashford, and Cassandra Pierce were arrested at their respective family homes on charges of conspiracy to violate civil rights, cyberbullying resulting in educational deprivation, and fraud. The sight of privileged teenagers being led away in handcuffs while news cameras rolled became the defining image of their downfall. Their mugshots where Madison's designer makeup ran down her face, and Trevor's arrogant smirk had been replaced by genuine terror went viral within hours. Victoria Blackwell's arrest was even more spectacular. Federal agents waited until she was addressing the Westfield Board of Directors, then served warrants for both her and the institution simultaneously. The woman who had orchestrated the destruction of scholarship students found herself facing federal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and abuse of authority under color of law. Judge Pierce's carefully constructed reputation crumbled when recordings surfaced of her coaching her daughter on how to avoid legal consequences for their harassment campaign. The Judicial Ethics Committee launched immediate disbarment proceedings, while prosecutors filed charges for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to deprive civil rights. Trevor's tech mogul father watched his company's stock price plummet as investors fled from association with the scandal. His government contracts were suspended pending ethics reviews, and his carefully cultivated image as a progressive businessman was destroyed by evidence of his son's systematic cruelty and his own attempts to cover it up. But Miguel Rodriguez's victory wasn't just about punishment, it was about institutional transformation. Westfield Academy faced federal oversight, mandated diversity training, and court-ordered restructuring of their scholarship program. Mrs. Hampton was terminated immediately, along with 3 other administrators who had participated in the conspiracy. Dr. Patricia Williams was reinstated as head of the new student advocacy program, tasked with ensuring that scholarship students would never again face systematic persecution. Carmen Vasquez was promoted to head of campus security, her years of invisible service finally recognized and rewarded with authority to protect vulnerable students. Isabella Rodriguez's reinstatement became a celebration of justice that resonated far beyond Westfield's walls. She walked back into the school she'd been forced to leave in shame, now accompanied by a personal security detail and followed by news cameras documenting her triumphant return. Her academic record was not only cleared but supplemented with formal recognition of her courage in exposing institutional corruption. The scholarship that had been stolen from her was not only restored but enhanced. Isabella received full funding for her remaining high school years, plus guaranteed college scholarships from 3 major universities competing to associate themselves with her story of resilience and justice. Miguel's methodical approach to warfare had achieved something unprecedented. Complete annihilation of his enemies combined with total protection of his daughter's future. The trio who had tortured Isabella for months were now facing years in federal prison, while she was being celebrated as a hero who had exposed systematic injustice. Rebecca Chun's investigative series won multiple journalism awards and prompted federal legislation requiring oversight of private school disciplinary practices. The Isabella Rodriguez Act became law within 8 months, protecting scholarship students nationwide from the kind of systematic persecution that had nearly destroyed Miguel's daughter. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's legal strategy became a case study in civil rights law, demonstrating how military precision and civilian justice could combine to protect the vulnerable from privileged predators. His firm was flooded with similar cases from families who had previously suffered in silence. 6 months after the confrontation, Miguel Rodriguez received a letter from the Department of Education, recognizing his extraordinary service in defending educational equality and civil rights. The construction worker who had been dismissed as powerless by wealthy elites was now being honored by the federal government for his tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to justice. Isabella flourished in her restored academic environment, but more importantly, she had learned from her father's example that justice was not a privilege reserved for the wealthy, was a right that could be claimed by anyone, with the courage to fight for it and the intelligence to fight effectively. The quiet girl who had been systematically destroyed by psychological warfare had become a powerful voice for educational justice. Her Marine father had taught her that no one fights alone, and that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unlikely warriors. Madison, Trevor, and Cassandra learned their lessons in federal detention centers, where their wealth and privilege provided no protection from the consequences of their actions. They had targeted someone they thought was defenseless, only to discover that Isabella Rodriguez was protected by a Marine veteran who never abandoned his fellow soldiers. Miguel Rodriguez had proven that sometimes the best defense is an overwhelming offense, and that justice delayed is not justice denied, it's justice gathering strength for total victory. 3 months later, Isabela Rodriguez stood at the podium of the National Education Justice Conference, addressing an audience of educators, civil rights advocates, and families who had faced similar battles. Her voice was steady, her posture confident. The quiet girl had become a powerful advocate for change, transformed by her father's example and her own hard-won wisdom. "They tried to destroy me because they thought I was alone," Isabela said, her words carrying across the silent auditorium. "But what they didn't understand is that I had a Marine for a father, and Marines never abandon their fellow soldiers. More importantly, I learned that none of us are truly alone when we stand up for what's right." Miguel Rodriguez watched from the audience's chest swelling with pride that had nothing to do with military honors or combat achievements. His daughter had not only survived her ordeal, she had emerged stronger, more determined, and committed to ensuring that no other child would face the systematic cruelty she had endured. The ripple effects of their victory continued to spread. 17 families whose children had been destroyed by Westfield's scholarship elimination program had joined a class action lawsuit that would ultimately force the school to pay millions in damages. Carmen Vasquez had become the head of a national organization protecting custodial workers who witnessed institutional abuse. Dr. Patricia Williams was leading federal efforts to reform private school oversight. But the most profound change was in the understanding that justice doesn't require wealth, connections, or institutional power. It requires courage, preparation, and the unwavering belief that every person deserves dignity and protection. Miguel Rodriguez had proven that a single determined parent, armed with evidence and guided by principle, could bring down an entire system of privilege and corruption. Madison Blackwell, now serving her second year in federal prison, had written multiple letters to Isabela attempting to apologize. Isabela never responded, not out of cruelty, but because she understood that true accountability meant accepting consequences without expecting forgiveness. Some wounds heal, but some lessons must be learned through suffering. Technological skills were now being used in court-mandated community service, helping law enforcement agencies track cyberbullying and digital harassment. His father's company never recovered from the scandal, serving as a permanent reminder that enabling cruelty has corporate consequences. Cassandra Pierce's judge mother had been disbarred and faced her own federal charges, proving that the law applies equally to those who enforce it and those who break it. The family's fall from grace became a cautionary tale about the dangers of believing privilege provides immunity from justice. Miguel returned to his construction work, but now he also served as a volunteer advocate for military families facing educational discrimination. His apartment command center had been replaced by a small office where he helped other parents navigate complex bureaucracies and fight for their children's rights. The quiet Marine had discovered that his greatest mission was in his own daughter's high school hallway, where he learned that protecting the innocent requires the same skills, whether you're fighting insurgents or privileged bullies. Isabela graduated as valedictorian of her class, but her speech wasn't about personal achievement. It was about the responsibility that comes with surviving injustice, the obligation to ensure that others don't face the same battles alone. She had learned from her father that true strength comes not from avoiding conflict, but from choosing the right battles and fighting them with honor. If you've made it this far, you're part of the 3% of people who understand that real change requires more than outrage, it requires action. Comment Semper Fidelis. If you believe that every child deserves a protector like Miguel Rodriguez, share this story because somewhere, right now, another quiet kid is facing bullies who think they're untouchable, and their parents need to know that justice is possible. By subscribing, you're not just supporting more stories, you're joining a community that believes ordinary people can achieve extraordinary justice when they refuse to accept defeat. We have hundreds of stories about parents who fought back, students who stood up, and communities that said enough to systematic cruelty. Miguel Rodriguez proved that you don't need wealth or connections to protect what matters most. You need courage, preparation, and the absolute refusal to let bullies win. Sometimes the quietest people have the strongest allies, and sometimes the most powerful victories come from the most unexpected warriors. Remember this: justice isn't about what you can afford, it's about what you're willing to fight for, and when you fight for the right reasons, with the right preparation, you become unstoppable. Miguel pulled his daughter into his arms, and for the first time since her expulsion, Isabela felt safe. But what she didn't see was the transformation happening in her father's eyes. The shift from concerned parent to combat-ready Marine, analyzing a battlefield and identifying enemy positions. "We're going home, Mia, and then we're going to fix this." As Miguel helped Isabela load her boxers into his truck, a soft voice spoke behind them. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Isabela's father?" They turned to see Carmen Vasquez, a middle-aged Latina woman in a school custodial uniform, approaching nervously. Miguel recognized her immediately. She was Roberto's wife, the janitor who'd helped him find work when he'd returned from Afghanistan, struggling to adjust to civilian life. "Mr. Rodriguez," I saw what happened to Isabella today, and I need to tell you something, but not here. Carmen glanced around nervously, then whispered, "Meet me at Rosa's Diner tonight at 9. Come alone. What I have to show you will change everything." Miguel nodded grimly. In combat, intelligence from local sources often meant the difference between life and death. If Carmen had information about the attack on his daughter, he was going to get it. That evening, Isabella sat in their small apartment doing homework for classes she'd never attend again. While Miguel drove to Rosa's Diner, Carmen was waiting. In a back booth, a manila envelope clutched in her hands like classified documents. "Mr. Rodriguez, I've been working at that school for 15 years. I see everything, but everyone treats me like I'm invisible. The 3 students who did this, 2, Isabella Madison, Trevor, and Cassandra, they've been planning this for months." Carmen opened the envelope and pulled out printed screenshots, recorded conversations transcribed by hand, and detailed notes written in careful Spanish. "I clean their classrooms after school. I empty their trash. I heard them talking about your daughter, planning how to destroy her. They call it Operation Cleanup, getting rid of the scholarship kids who make them look bad." Miguel's hands trembled as he read through the evidence. Text messages between the trio discussing Isabella's work schedule at the diner, photos they'd taken of her father's truck to mock her family's financial situation, detailed psychological profiles they'd written about her vulnerabilities and fears. "There's more," Carmen continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Mrs. Hampton knew those photos were fake. The school's IT director, Mr. Chunhei's daughter, goes to Westfield too. He told Mrs. Hampton the images were digitally manipulated. But Madison's mother called Mrs. Hampton that morning and told her to expel Isabella anyway. It's all recorded." Carmen pulled out an old cassette player, the kind custodial staff used to listen to music while working. "I was cleaning Mrs. Hampton's office when she took the call. I recorded everything." Miguel listened to the crackling audio of Mrs. Hampton's conversation with Madison's mother, his Marine training automatically cataloging every piece of evidence, every admission of guilt, every moment of premeditated cruelty. This wasn't just bullying, it was a conspiracy that reached into the school's administration. "Why are you helping us?" Miguel asked. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "Because Isabella is good. She tutors my nephew after school, never charges us anything. She brings him food when she knows his family is struggling. These rich kids, they destroy people like it's a game. Someone needs to fight back." Miguel stared at the evidence spread across the diner table, enough proof to expose not just the 3 students, but the entire system that had protected them. In Afghanistan, this would be called actionable intelligence. The enemy had revealed their positions, their tactics, and their command structure. "Carmen, I need you to make copies of everything, and I need you to keep recording. Can you do that?" Carmen nodded firmly. "Whatever you need, Mr. Rodriguez. It's time someone held these people accountable." Miguel drove home that night with a combat plan forming in his mind. His daughter had been attacked by enemies using psychological warfare, protected by a corrupt command structure that valued money over justice. But they'd made one critical error. They'd assumed Miguel Rodriguez was just another powerless parent who could be intimidated into silence. They were about to learn that Marines don't abandon their fellow soldiers, and Miguel Rodriguez had just been given a mission, complete in total victory, with no acceptable casualties except the enemy's reputation and future. The war for Isabella's justice was about to begin, and her Marine father had just recruited his first intelligence asset. Over the next 3 weeks, Miguel Rodriguez transformed his small apartment into a military-style command center, complete with timeline charts, evidence boards, and surveillance schedules that would have impressed his former commanding officers in Afghanistan. He'd taken personal leave from work, telling his supervisor that his daughter was facing a family emergency that required his full attention. Carmen became his primary intelligence operative, moving through Westfield Academy like a ghost, invisible to the privileged students and administrators who barely acknowledged her existence. She'd learned to position her cleaning cart near strategic locations during key conversations, timing her work schedules to coincide with the trio's planning sessions. The evidence she gathered was damning. Beyond Miguel's wildest expectations, Madison, Trevor, and Cassandra had documented their psychological warfare campaign with the arrogance of people who believed they were untouchable. They'd kept group chats detailing their attacks, recorded videos mocking Isabella's reactions, and even created a point system for inflicting emotional damage. Miguel's military training and intelligence analysis revealed patterns that civilian parents would have missed. The trio's attacks followed classic psychological operations principles: isolate the target, control information flow, undermine credibility, and destroy morale through sustained pressure. They'd essentially conducted a textbook psyops campaign against a 7-year-old girl. But the most explosive discovery came when Carmen managed to access the school's administrative files during a late-night cleaning session. Hidden in Mrs. Hampton's locked desk drawer were printed emails between board members discussing the scholarship problem and strategies for maintaining institutional character. The correspondence revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond 3 spoiled teenagers. Board Chair Victoria Blackwell, Madison's mother, had orchestrated a campaign to eliminate scholarship students through manufactured disciplinary incidents. Isabella wasn't their first victim. She was just the most recent casualty in a systematic purge designed to return Westfield to its traditional student body. Miguel photographed every document with military precision, creating multiple backup copies and detailed chain of custody records. His years of handling classified intelligence had taught him that evidence without proper documentation was useless in any tribunal, whether military or civilian. The breakthrough came when Carmen discovered that Trevor had been careless with his digital security. During one of his bragging sessions, he'd shown Madison and Cassandra his Isabella files, gigabytes of surveillance photos, doctored images, and recorded conversations stored on a laptop he brought to school daily. He leaves it in his locker during gym class. Carmen reported during one of their clandestine meetings at Rosa's Diner, third period, every Tuesday and Thursday. Locker 247. Combination is his birthday. The spoiled little prince uses the same code for everything. Miguel's expression darkened. In Afghanistan, enemy intelligence had been fair game for acquisition, but this was civilian territory, with different rules of engagement. However, those rules seemed to favor predators over victims, and Miguel was done playing by regulations that protected his daughter's tormentors. "Can you get me 15 minutes alone with that laptop?" Carmen nodded grimly. "The gym teacher takes smoke breaks during class. I can create a distraction, maybe trigger the fire alarm in the far wing. But Mr. Rodriguez, if they catch you, they won't catch me." Miguel replied with the quiet confidence of a man who'd infiltrated enemy compounds under cover of darkness. "I learned a few things in the Marines about acquiring intel from hostile forces." The operation went flawlessly, while Carmen triggered a plumbing emergency that flooded the bathroom near the gymnasium. Miguel used lock-picking skills learned during urban warfare training to access Trevor's locker. The laptop was password protected, but Miguel's military cybersecurity training included basic digital infiltration techniques. What he found on Trevor's computer was a prosecutor's dream. Detailed planning documents for Isabella's destruction, backup files of the original doctored photos, and most damning of all, a video Trevor had recorded of the trio celebrating Isabella's expulsion while mocking her father's military service. "Look at the little scholarship princess crying." Madison's voice echoed from the laptop speakers as Miguel watched his daughter's humiliation through her tormentor's lens. Her jarhead, "Daddy can't save her now. Maybe he can teach her to flip burgers like a proper little servant." Miguel's hands shook with barely controlled rage as he copied every file, every image, every piece of evidence that proved his daughter's innocence and her attacker's guilt. But he maintained operational discipline, methodically documenting everything according to legal standards that would hold up in court. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Isabella's former chemistry teacher, Dr. Patricia Williams, reached out through Carmen with information that would complete Miguel's case. Dr. Williams had been fired the previous year for budget cuts, but the real reason was her opposition to the administration's treatment of scholarship students. "I documented everything," Dr. Williams told Miguel during a secret meeting in her home. "Test scores proving Isabella never cheated. Surveillance footage I secretly saved showing the trio's harassment. Even recording of faculty meetings where they discussed covering up incidents to protect wealthy families." Miguel now possessed a complete intelligence picture of the enemy's operations, command structure, and vulnerabilities. Every document was authenticated, every piece of evidence legally obtained, every witness statement corroborated. In military terms, he had achieved total intelligence dominance over his targets, but acquiring intelligence was only phase 1 of the operation. Phase 2 would be the most dangerous part, deploying that intelligence to destroy his daughter's enemies while protecting her future. Miguel Rodriguez was about to launch an assault that would shake Westfield Academy to its very foundations. The quiet Marine had become a predator, and his prey had no idea they were already in his crosshairs. Miguel Rodriguez spent the next week transforming from intelligence gatherer to strategic commander, planning an assault that would simultaneously destroy his daughter's tormentors and rebuild her shattered future. His military training had taught him that victory required more than evidence, it demanded perfect timing, overwhelming force, and the element of complete surprise. The first phase of his battle plan involved recruiting allies from unexpected quarters. Dr. Patricia Williams connected him with investigative journalist Rebecca Chen, whose daughter had been a previous victim of Westfield's scholarship elimination program. Rebecca had been investigating private school corruption for months, waiting for the perfect case to expose the entire system. "Your daughter's story isn't isolated," Rebecca explained during their clandestine meeting. "I've documented 17 scholarship students who've been systematically destroyed by wealthy families over the past 3 years, but Isabella's case is different. To have evidence that can bring down the entire network." Miguel also reached out to Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, his former commanding officer who'd transitioned to civilian life as a civil rights attorney. Morrison had spent years fighting military injustice and was hungry for a case that would translate his combat experience into civilian battlefield victories. "Miguel, what they did to Isabella constitutes a federal civil rights violation. Morrison analyzed after reviewing the evidence. Conspiracy to deprive her of educational opportunities based on socioeconomic discrimination. We're talking about criminal charges, not just school discipline. The second phase involved psychological warfare against the trio and their families. Miguel began leaving subtle signs that someone was watching, parking his truck where Madison's mother would see it during her country club visits, appearing at Trevor's father's business presentations, showing up at Cassandra's family restaurant during their dinner reservations. None of these appearances were threatening or illegal, but they sent a clear message to families accustomed to operating in shadows. Someone was paying attention, someone was keeping score, and someone was preparing to act. Carmen reported that the trio's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. Madison had started demanding that her bodyguard escort her to school. Trevor was checking his laptop obsessively, growing paranoid about his digital security. Cassandra was pressuring her judge father to handle the Rodriguez situation before it became a problem. But Miguel's masterpiece was the documentation phase. He'd learned from his military experience that victory was meaningless without complete enemy surrender. Every piece of evidence was being prepared for simultaneous release to multiple targets: the school board, the state education department, the FBI's civil rights division, and Rebecca Chin's news organization. The psychological pressure was building. On all fronts, Mrs. Hampton received an anonymous package containing photos of her meeting with board members, accompanied by a note reading, "Conspiracy to violate civil rights is a federal crime. Choose your next move carefully." Board Chair Victoria Blackwell found similar packages delivered to her office, her home, and her country club, each containing different pieces of evidence about her daughter's crimes and her own administrative cover-up. The message was clear. Everything was documented, everything was witnessed, and everything was ready for public exposure. Miguel's preparation included coaching Isabella for what was coming. His daughter had been withdrawn and depressed since her expulsion, but her father's systematic approach to justice was slowly rebuilding her confidence. "Mia, in the Marines, we have a saying, no one fights alone. What happened to you wasn't random, it was a coordinated attack by people who thought they could destroy you without consequences. They were wrong." Isabella watched her father's evidence boards with growing amazement. "Dad, how did you learn to do all this?" "The same way I learned to protect my unit in Afghanistan. You identify the enemy, you gather intelligence, you find their weaknesses, and then you strike with overwhelming force. But most importantly, you never stop fighting until every single person under your command is safe." The final preparation phase involved coordinating the assault for maximum impact. Miguel scheduled simultaneous meetings with school administrators, legal authorities, and media contacts. Every enemy position would be hit at the same moment, preventing them from coordinating a defense or covering up evidence. Rebecca Chen had prepared her expose for publication the moment Miguel gave the signal. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison had filed preliminary paperwork with federal prosecutors, ready to trigger a full investigation. Carmen had documented her final pieces of evidence, including recorded conversations of the trio planning their next victim. Miguel stood in his command center apartment, looking at 3 weeks of military precision planning spread across his walls. Timeline charts showed the exact sequence of the trio's crimes. Evidence boards displayed damning proof of administrative conspiracy. Communication logs tracked every lie, every cover-up, every moment of institutional betrayal. Tomorrow morning, he would walk into Westfield Academy not as a powerless construction worker, but as a Marine veteran armed with overwhelming evidence and the unshakable determination to protect his fellow soldier. The trio who had destroyed his daughter's life were about to face an enemy they'd never encountered, a father who refused to accept defeat. Miguel Rodriguez had spent 3 weeks preparing for total war. Now it was time to deploy everything he'd learned in the service of his country against the spoiled teenagers who'd made the mistake of targeting his daughter. The quiet Marine's revenge was about to begin, and his enemies had no idea what was coming for them. Tuesday morning, November 30th, las 9:47 a.m., Miguel Rodriguez walked through the pristine entrance of Westfield Academy, carrying a leather briefcase that contained enough evidence to destroy lives and reshape futures. He wore his dress military uniform, the same one he'd worn when receiving his combat action ribbon, because today wasn't just about his daughter's vindication. Today was about total victory. The receptionist barely looked up as Miguel approached her desk. "I'm here to see Mrs. Hampton about my daughter Isabella Rodriguez. I believe there's been a misunderstanding that needs immediate correction." "Sir, your daughter was expelled for, ma'am." Miguel's voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed under fire. "You're going to call Mrs. Hampton right now and tell her that Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez is here with evidence regarding a federal civil rights violation. She has 5 minutes to clear her schedule." Something in Miguel's tone made the receptionist reach for her phone immediately. Within minutes, Miguel was escorted to Mrs. Hampton's office, where he found not just the disciplinary coordinator, but Principal Davidson and Board Chair Victoria Blackwell waiting for him exactly as he'd predicted. "Mr. Rodriguez, I understand you're upset about Isabella's situation, but bringing military intimidation tactics into our school Victoria Blackwell began, her voice dripping with the condescension of inherited wealth. Miguel opened his briefcase. With deliberate precision, Mrs. Blackwell, what I'm bringing into your school is evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and federal civil rights violations committed by your daughter and her accomplices against my child. He placed the first document on Mrs. Hampton's desk, a transcript of the recorded conversation between Mrs. Hampton and Victoria Blackwell discussing Isabella's expulsion. Despite known evidence of her innocence, Mrs. Hampton's face went pale as she recognized her own voice on the transcript. Where did you get this? This is private communication. This is evidence of criminal conspiracy, Miguel replied, his voice steady as incoming artillery. Obtained legally by witnesses to your crimes. He placed the second document, forensic analysis, proving the photos were doctored. Signed by the FBI's Digital Crimes Unit. Principal Davidson stammered. Mr. Rodriguez, even if there were irregularities in the disciplinary process,